Hello, Christina here, and I am going to talk to you today about managing expectations. Now, this kind of came to light a few days ago. I was working with my team, and a few of them come to me and said, hey, do we need more training? Do we need a different onboarding system? Do we need this? Do we need that? Because there are people that are struggling. And I said, I think it's time that we have a conversation about managing our expectations, because the truth is you can only manage your own personal expectations, okay? And so what I mean by that is that you can manage expectations in conversation, when you are talking to new people, when you are building relationships with people, when you are onboarding new clients and customers. You can manage your expectations in your relationship, in your marriage, in your friendships, definitely in business. But the number one thing that it comes down to is taking extreme ownership of the skills that maybe aren't quite there yet, or extreme ownership of your production level, or extreme ownership in a conversation with you and your partner. Sometimes it's really hard, but I'm going to give you 5 tips on how to manage your expectations so that you can be a little bit happier in life, so that you have some insight into business, and so that you have a few tools in your tool belt when you're disappointed, frustrated, anxious, or angry sometimes, when it comes down to what your expectations are of a certain situation, a certain conversation, or a certain life experience, okay? So number 1, don't assume anything, right? Have conversations with people that matter, and even over communicate what it is that you want, right? Be very, very clear in your conversation, and instead of avoiding hard conversations, which is what many people do because they don't like the discomfort of having those conversations, have those conversations as soon as and as fast as you can. Because if you don't, and you leave room for interpretation on either side, on your side or on the other person's side, and it's a difficult discussion, what happens is there's some insight on the inside that is left to that other person's interpretation. So there could be even a bigger conflict because they assume that this is what's going on behind the scenes, and maybe it isn't at all, right? So the first thing that you should do when you are in that place of having these conversations is discuss what is expected. What is your role? What is their role? What do you feel comfortable with? And playing it all out, right? Number 2 is accountability, right? When you have accountability in your relationship, when you have accountability in your business, it's really important that you have discussions around your goals and what you want, right? Often I ask people why they want what they want. Why do you want this? And then when I know why they want something, I'll also make sure that I ask permission to remind them of why they started in the first place, or why they came to this decision. Hold on just a sec. My mom's trying to call me right now. All right. And so I'll often ask permission to remind them of why they got started in the first place, why they wanted this outcome, why this conversation was so important to them in the first place, because things are going to get tough. Life is not just sunshine and rainbows. There are ups and downs, and often we have to be reminded of why we started in the first place. Sometimes that happens in a relationship. Sometimes it happens in a friendship, right? But if expectations are not reasonable, you have to have boundaries, and you have to be okay with pushing back a little bit with confidence and kindness always, right? So that you show up as the most authentic version of you, and there's not a piece of you that gets shut down, a piece of you that is not heard, because that's where resentment builds. And that's where you're going to have challenges in both personal and in business. Okay, number 3, removing expectations from personal and professional relationships is wise and kind. It's both. You are only responsible for yourself. I don't know if you've ever heard Jocko Willink's or read Jocko Willink's Extreme Ownership, but you're only responsible for yourself. And so when I'm responsible, I take responsibility. When I'm wrong, I'll say that I'm wrong. When I understand more of my reaction, I'll have a bigger discussion, right? But when you realize that how people feel is a reflection of who they are, and their reaction is a piece of their past experience, their education, things that have happened, their upbringing, all of those things, you realize that their expectations are often a projection of who they are, right? So when you can show up, take full responsibility, don't assume that you know, and have hard conversations, you're going to be way ahead of the game, okay? And I also want to explain something in business before I go on to the other two. Often in business, and this is in every type of business, okay? Every type of business, 80% of people are there for community, culture, and to make a living. 15% of people are there because they want a little bit more to life. They like a little bit of leadership. They like recognition. And so they'll work a little bit harder. And then it's only 5% of people that go all out and will do absolutely anything to achieve their goals. And so when you understand that, you start to create a culture where everybody is welcome. No matter what they do, no matter who they are, if you make people feel good about you, you make people feel good about themselves, and you make people feel good about the environment that they're in, they'll stay forever. It doesn't matter what the goal is set or what goal is set. It doesn't matter, right? And let's really quickly talk about the difference between goals and expectations. Goals are based upon facts and reality, whereas expectations are beliefs based on hopes and emotions. That's the difference between the two, okay? And so when you recognize that you can goal set with somebody and set their expectations to be realistic, you'll get more out of them than if you sugarcoat it, right? If you say it's easy or no problem, this is going to be great. If you set them up for failure in something that might be challenging, they might need to learn some new skills. They might need to push through the days that they don't feel like doing it, right? If you set them up for this is easy, you're actually enabling them to give up sooner. Kind of crazy, right? Number 4 is enjoy and appreciate today. Show gratitude and grace. Gratitude and grace. Be grateful for everything that you have and give people grace. Always giving people the benefit of the doubt. If you hear something through the grapevine, if there's a miscommunication with your partner, getting curious instead of getting angry, right? Like, tell me what you meant by that. Or why would you say that? I'm curious, right? Being curious over combative will get you way more out of life. My husband always says you get more bees with honey, and it's the truth, okay? It's really important to stay focused on where you're going as opposed to where you are, and especially when you are somebody that struggle with feeling motivated every day, or you are challenged in finding inspiration. So have a grand version for yourself, but also realize that that is going to shift and change over the years, and that all you really need to know is what the next right step is, okay? And then number 5, if you can anticipate problems, right? Like, we all know our partners, we know what triggers them, we know what to say and what not to say. If you anticipate problems, plan for them, right? We all know when it's going to be a difficult conversation with a partner, right? If you know who they are, make sure you plan for it, right? If you know your people on your team, if you know your leadership, you'll know how they're going to react to certain situations, and how you react is actually teaching them something. It's showing them a different way. And if you don't react because you don't have any expectations for anybody other than yourself, then all of a sudden things shift, right? Often when people come to me and say, I'm working with this team, but they're not doing what I want, or they're not growing, or they're not doing anything, and they're complaining, right? Complaining. That energy doesn't get you anywhere. What they should be focusing on is, what can I do personally to take accountability and responsibility of what's going on right now, and how can I improve it? And usually it's based on your level of action and what you're willing to do. And so often we point fingers and we blame other people because it's easier than going to do the work ourselves, right? It's like hiring somebody that isn't working, right? I don't know if you've ever been in this position. You've ever worked with a coworker that you've always got to pick up the slack, or you've hired somebody that didn't work out, and you just keep putting up with it. Instead of realizing that those people don't need to stick around, you can expect a higher quality of work, right? As long as you've laid it out in the beginning and nothing is a surprise, okay? So when you're managing your own personal expectations, this is how you find happiness, okay? You give yourself time, because grossly overestimate what we can do in a year, and we underestimate what we can do in 5 to 10. So give yourself time, and if you don't hit that goal, reevaluate and adjust course and give yourself a little bit more time to do so, right? Because you don't win and you lose, you win and you learn. So use those challenges to learn something and move through and find a better way to do things, right? One of the things that I've learned a lot about in the last year is adapting to changing expectations, right? What do others expect of me? What happens when things go wrong? How do you act, right? How you do one thing, you do everything. So when things go wrong, can you take the emotion out of it? Can you use some emotional intelligence and evaluate the situation in a difficult conversation? And instead of beating yourself up, you just adjust course. Is that something that you can do? Because that's really, really helpful in creating more peace and harmony and happiness in your life, right? The other thing that often we do, and maybe I feel like women do it more than men, but we judge ourselves really harshly, right? Like I can tell you the conversations I've gone back over and over and over in my head. Often when we are disappointed in ourselves, it's because we've stepped outside of our integrity. We've stepped outside of our core beliefs, and we've acted in trauma. We've been triggered and acted in trauma, and we're not proud of our behavior, right? But instead of reflecting and pushing that on other people and say, they did this, they did that, they did this, okay, how could I have behaved differently? What could I have said differently? What did I learn from this situation so it'll never happen again, right? And learning to say no and creating boundaries, right? When you take too much on, you get stressed out, you get burnt out. But when you learn to set boundaries and give responsibility away to those that want to take it on, all of a sudden the pendulum swings, right? And if you want to take responsibility for your team, for your relationship, for everything, the highs, like the good things, all the good things, like look what I did or look what we did, and you want to take responsibility for it, you also have to take responsibility for the things that didn't go so well, right? And again, you're only personally responsible for yourself. Sometimes, when you act out of alignment, you can even feel resentful and angry because it lacks the integrity that you had in your core values, right? And when we refuse to have the conversations that need to be had, we're just masking the true problem and kicking the can down the line, as opposed to having the real conversations up front and being courageous and brave enough to have them, right? And if you don't have those conversations and you continue to quiet your voice when you know that it needs to be heard, it creates a dependency from somebody else that has no idea that you're thinking that or going through that. It creates a dependency from somebody else instead of self-responsibility for their own actions or for what they're going to create in their life and in their business, right? So often people will take on more responsibility in a relationship or in a business because it's faster for them to do it themselves than explain to somebody else how to do it. I know this is very relatable in many situations, but what happens then is that you're enabling people to stay the same instead of helping them grow, instead of helping them take responsibility, right? You got to show them how to find the solution instead of giving them the solution. And this is where we've really gone wrong, I think, in society. We've had a lot of time that has passed and we haven't really used critical thinking. We've just taken for granted what we have. And we have skipped the hard conversations. We've skipped the things that really truly matter because we're scared of offending others. And it's created a really big problem in society these days because everyone is so scared not to have that conversation that they don't have it because they feel like they risk offending somebody else. And oh no, what would happen if that happened, And what's really interesting is that when you have these conversations, you have to risk offending somebody else because these conversations are so... And in your level of happiness, that if you don't have those conversations and they lay buried, and you don't have the tools or the systems to move through that conflict, that frustration, that anxiety, you end up blowing up and acting out of integrity and not being proud of what you do. So, if you want to manage your expectations to find happiness, you take full responsibility of what you do and how you show up. You get the help you need. Maybe you need to see a counselor or a therapist. Maybe you need to talk to a friend and go for coffee or margaritas. I don't know. You learn the skills that you need to. Maybe it's communication skills. You learn the skills that you need to grow into the person that you need to become to experience life the way that you want to live it. And what I can tell you is when you up level as a human, when you do your personal development and you up level as a human, all of a sudden you have different people around you that support you, that love you. You have a level of respect that is there, right? Have you ever had tons of conflict with friends or family members? And then you realize all of that was there because you lacked communication, people lacked empathy, they were working out of trauma, they were living in trauma instead of actually seeing all sides and having a conversation. When that happens, often people get hurt. But as you do the hard work and you reflect on where you need to grow, you reflect on your skill set and how you communicate and how you show up for people, you take full responsibility for yourself and for your actions, and you enable people to grow around you, you'll have a higher quality of people in your life, and you'll get hurt a heck of a lot less. So I hope this was valuable to some of you. I hope if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to reach out and we can have a conversation. If you feel that somebody that you know needs to hear this, feel free to tag them or send this to them. But this is something that's come up quite a bit in the last week, and I've done a few different trainings on it. And I was like, I should just come talk about this right here. So I hope that's helpful. Hope you have an amazing day. We'll see you soon. Bye.
If you think this video can help a friend, make sure you share it.